Today we're talking to James Altucher, and for this channel I will tell you he started an agency back in the 2000s that he sold. He's worked with HBO, he's worked with a ton of major companies. He is the ultimate eccentric entrepreneur of the new age. It's probably the best way to describe him. He started as an agency owner, built it into a multi-million-dollar business, sold the agency, lost money a bunch of times, made money a bunch of times. He's done everything, including options trading, making millions of dollars there. He's touched the TV business, doing a pilot for HBO. He sent me an early copy of his book, and we're gonna sit down for an interview, and I want you to listen to it because this is an entrepreneur that does not care what the typical process of entrepreneurship should be. He wanted to be a stand-up comedian, so he bought a comedy club in New York, and he just went for it. He wanted to start an online course, and he didn't care about coming off as sketchy or scammy. He ended up launching something like, Bitcoin Millionaire Tells the Future, something like that, made millions of dollars there. So this is a guy that has no hesitation at all about making money, and apparently no hesitation about losing money. I've looked up to this guy for a long time, and I wanted to share this interview with you. So let's jump into it. Before we get started on the interview, if you wouldn't mind just liking this video, subscribing, if you want to support this type of content, go for it. This video is brought to you by Email 10K. Learn how to book meetings with billion-dollar brands and take your company to the next level at email10k.com.
Thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
Of course. I'm a huge fanboy. I've been reading your stuff since maybe, 6-7 years ago, since you were originally blowing up on Twitter.
Yeah, I feel like we've corresponded before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hyped. And I also wanted to give you credit for your producer sending me the audiobook. I think you're the first interview that's actually sent me the audiobook in advance. It's always the PDF. And I was taking I actually took a trip to LA so I could listen to the audiobook for 4 hours there. 4 hours.
Oh, good.
And it was a great weekend listening to this.
Was the audiobook okay? You're the first person to listen to the audiobook. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I love it. I'm an audio only guy. So if it's not audio, it's very hard for me to even start reading something.
Cool. Well, thanks again, and I'm glad you liked it. It's been a very interesting book for me to write.
Awesome. So let's start with one thing that my audience will love is, and I don't think you've been framed this way before. You started a massively successful agency back in the day, and you sold it. Can you talk a little about that? What was that like, starting the agency?
Sure. And what's interesting is that I knew nothing. Like zero about business and then agency business, which is, there's many different types of businesses and you might be good at some, but not good at others. And business, I always say business is not, and I even say this in the book, business is not just one skill. Nobody can say, oh, I'm good at business. You have to be good at having ideas, executing those ideas, sales, marketing, management, leadership, selling a company, handling administrative stuff. There's a lot of micro skills to business, and you have to either be good at all of them or find some way to efficiently outsource some of those things. And I mean efficiently because you don't want to go broke because you can't handle administrative stuff. And yet, so I knew nothing about business. I had zero of those micro skills. And then furthermore, the agency business is its own beast because you're not dealing with 1 million customers, you're dealing with 10 customers, and they all think that they own you, and you have to do whatever they say. So I wanted to be a writer, and I was working at HBO, and I was happy doing what I was doing. But very few people in New York City knew how to make a website back then. This was 1995 or early 1996. I knew there was maybe 5 people who knew how to make a website, and I'm not exaggerating. There was only about 5 people. And I was one of them. So I was making HBO's websites, and other entertainment companies would call me and say, hey, can you make a website for us? And I didn't want to turn down money. So I enlisted the help of my brother-in-law, and I was still working at HBO, but we also started making websites at night for all these companies that started asking me. So I kind of got lucky, right place at the right time. Everybody started, not everybody was sure they needed a website or whether this web thing was going to be a fad, but I was a good salesperson because I had a strong vision that the internet was going to be everywhere and every company was going to need their own website at some point. I mean, HBO, as an example, didn't own HBO.com. They had homeboxoffice.com. Some other company owned HBO.com, a medical supplies company. And I, was able to more or less convince HBO to buy HBO.com for $250,000 in 1995. So, part of my job was sales, but also with an agency business, there's a lot of skills that, there's the basic skills of like, okay, a client hires you, hey, can you make us a website? And you have to come up with ideas and then you have to make the website. But there's also in an agency business, you have to follow through and you have to call them back and you have to cover your ass and you have to keep in touch with your clients. And, there's also a saying, your best new customers are your old customers. So like, hey, Sony, I just did a website for you. Would you like another website? Or maybe you would like that. You come up with ideas. Would you like to do this idea? And you go vacation together and you hang out with each other. And I'm not very good at that. And then eventually we were getting bigger and bigger, and I had to hire people, which I had never done before. I had to manage people, which I had never done before. The business was with my family, which has its own set of problems. So it was very complicated, but fortunately there was not a lot of supply of people who knew how to make websites, and there was a lot of demand because every single company on the planet needed a website. So price was irrationally high. Price is a function of supply and demand. Price was irrationally high for a very short period of time. Let's call it 3 or 4 years. You can make a 3-page website and charge $100,000 for it. And while that was happening, I stayed in that business. And demand was so high and then demand for shares of internet stocks was high. Obviously, there was an internet bubble. So I was able to sell the company because anybody, like an air conditioning company, was happy buying a web company because now they were suddenly an internet company. And so there was a huge demand for shares of internet companies. And so I happened to have shares of an internet company, my own company, and I sold them. And price was again, irrationally high. So that in a nutshell is the story, but it was insane because I didn't know what I was doing at every single level of this process. So every single level created incredibly insane stories that made the entire experience of being an entrepreneur very unpleasant. Being an entrepreneur is not pleasant. Like, people think it's going to be, oh, now I'm my own boss. You're never your own boss. Your employees are your boss. Your partners are your bosses, your investors are your bosses, and your customers are definitely your bosses. So like my biggest clients, they could call me up at 4 a.m. and I would have to talk to them, and they would call me at 4 a.m. And they could pay whatever they wanted because I was afraid to lose them as a customer. I knew nothing about how to have confidence as an entrepreneur. It was just insane. And then when I was selling the company, you don't realize this, but it takes a long time to close a sale after you agree to sell. So here I was going to have money in my bank for the first time ever, and I was really afraid to lose it. And it would take much longer than I thought to close the deal, and it was just excruciating. And then I made all this money, and then I lost it 2 years later.
In options trading, right?
No, not in options trading. In just straightforward trading, stocks. I knew nothing. I thought I was when you make money selling a business, you suddenly think, or at least I did. I thought I was a genius in everything, and I also thought I didn't make enough money compared to what other people were making. So I just invested. I had investing as a collection of micro skills. This was in the 90s. I had no idea what I was doing. So I did everything wrong, and I cashed out at the right moment of everything, and then I did what's called the Texas hedge, is that I reinvested it all in internet stocks and lost everything. So everything. I went from $15 million in my checking account to $143.
That's so insane. I feel like I've been close to that a few times. Also.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's a mindset thing, right? Like you want to go for it.
Yeah.
Not as extreme as you. Hopefully,
because
that never happens.
A lot of times, a basic problem people have in every area is they think of reward more than they think of risk. And the thing is, if you compound small rewards, then over a short period of time, you're gonna make an incredible amount of money. But if you're trying to go for one big reward because you have a scarcity complex, you think this is my last chance, then you're not taking into account the risk and you'll lose everything. Risk is 99% of the job of an investor, not reward. And because reward you'll find every now and then, you'll find opportunities, and you have to have an abundance feeling that I'm ready to find opportunities. But I never took into account the risk. Now my entire job is taking into account risk.
So is that what changed? Because right now you have money, I can only assume, at least enough to live. Like you got a nice place, like you're crushing it now. So what's changed that has allowed you to hold on to the money this time, at least for right now?
Okay, and look, this happened. It took a long time, and it took a long, frustrating time because I think I'm crazy about this stuff. But I mean, I went broke from money. I made money and went broke after making money. I was good at making money. I wasn't good at keeping it or growing it. So I would go broke 4 times in a row. But then there's 2 things that changed. One is, and this part will sound like a cliche, but you have to get back to the basics. Money is just an energy. Like money rewards you for having good, this is going to sound cliche-ish, but I don't know how to say it.
No, I want to hear it.
But money is an energy that rewards you for, creativity and your ability to make friends and connection. Nobody wants to do business with someone they don't like. So you make friends with people who you want to work with, not in an insidious way, but because you're a good person and you're healthy and you're feeling good and you're getting along with your spouse and your friends and your family, and that allows you to come up, you have energy for ideas, and you don't dwell on regrets or anxieties. So these are good, healthy things. I call this my daily practice, which is every day focus a little bit on physical health so you don't get sick, emotional health so you're not arguing with people all the time because that's a waste of energy, creative health, I write down 10 ideas a day to keep exercising the creativity muscle, and spiritual health, which is don't dwell on regrets and anxieties. So that's basic step number 1. Basic step number 2 is anytime I start something, am I mitigating all of the risks as much as possible? You can't eliminate risk. There's always risks, and you can't avoid risk because then you won't accomplish anything. But your job is to mitigate risk. So if I start a business, I have to ask, why hasn't anyone else started this business? What is my special advantage that me out of 6 billion people have this idea that I could do this business better than anyone else? Oh, there are competitors. Why can't they? Why am I going to do better than them? They've been doing it for years. You have to, or if there's an investment, again, why isn't everybody already in this investment if it's so great? What gives me a special advantage? You always have to have a reason why you're getting, who are you and why are you and why now has to be answered for everything that you do in life. And the other thing is you have to diversify. And that doesn't mean buying a basket of stocks. It doesn't mean, starting a business in, that nobody else is doing. It just means diversify all the things that give you happiness and maybe money in life, because then when one thing's not working out, at least you have these other things working out. So I have investments, but I also start companies, and I also have things that I love doing that have nothing to do with money.
When you, okay, so this is kind of a little bit of a different area. When you went out to buy that comedy club in New York, I actually really want to pick your brain around that, because you didn't pick the main comedy store, not the comedy, whatever the big one is in New York. I think you picked it was like the 4th or 5th biggest one.
Yeah.
Was that getting turned down, or how did you pick the one that you ended up investing in?
No, in that specific case, that was different than an investment or a business decision. And I'll just give you a quick story. I was interviewing Ken Langone, who's worth like 10 billion or so, and he started Home Depot, and he did other things, but he made 10 billion just from that. And I was interviewing him, and we're at my comedy club, and he asked me, "Oh, this is your comedy club?" And I said, "Yeah." And suddenly he gets really serious, and he's like, "Well, how much? What are your revenues per square foot? How much does each waiter make? How much does the bartender make? How much do you pay the comedians? What's your margin on the alcohol?" And I'm like, I don't know. And because I wasn't really involved in the business at all. And he was like really disappointed. Like, you really need to know your numbers. I could see his face fell. Like, he was just so disappointed in me. And the reality is I didn't buy that as an investment. I bought that because I lived across the street. It was as comedians say, it was my home club. It was the club that I performed at the most, and they were at a point where they needed some investment. And so I was there to invest because I love comedy and I wanted to support the comedy scene. And I liked walking across the street from my apartment and just going up on stage. So I did that investment for every other reason other than investing. So instead of buying a car or a house, I invested in a comedy club. That's all.
And it's opened this whole thing. I love that, actually. And that must come from such an abundance place as well.
Yeah, because you can't, I sometimes think to myself, like, I have lots of interests. And so, for instance, I write, I do comedy, I do podcasting, I do other things. A lot of these things don't really make wealth. Some of them make a little bit of money, some of them don't. Comedy, owning a club or performing comedy does not make money, and very rare. And but some things, part of diversifying is that you don't do everything just for the money, because we get dopamine from things other than, and we get happiness from things other than just making money. And it's very important that to live a full life, you have to do things you love doing. And now, yes, everything you do, if you do it well, if you master something, not only does it feel immensely pleasurable because you get into this flow experience, this flow state and so on, but skills from spending 6 or 7 years performing stand-up comedy, that's given me an enormous skill set for public speaking, writing, even podcasting, even negotiating, because comedy is a negotiation with the crowd. I'm going to sell you a joke and convince you to laugh. So, and it very much works that way.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And I remember in the book, you were talking about jumping the line and talking to these major comedians. I was out at the comedy store for a while. I was doing some work with Pauly Shore, and I just, it was the same kind of mindset that you have. Like, you couldn't ask him anything about the numbers. You couldn't ask him about it seemed like all he was preoccupied with was being Pauly Shore and like just creating things. And he had everything else outsourced in the entire club. I don't know if you can run a comedy club without doing that.
Yeah, no, a comedy club, like it's basically a bar and a big room for an audience and relationships with comedians. And I didn't know anything. So, but I loved performing, and this was, part of my way of skipping the line. And like when I started comedy, every comedian was telling me, James, just start from the bottom. Like, I've been doing this 20 years, James. That's how long it takes. You're just a baby in this. And I'm like, I'm, at the time, I guess I was like 45, 46. Well, I'm 53 now. And I don't have 20. I'm not going to wait until I'm 66 years old before I like really hit my stride as a comedian. No way. And so I needed to skip the line, and nobody believed you could do that. You had to, James, you have to watch your favorite comedians, then go to open mics, then, just hang out comedy clubs, like the bad ones, and see if they put you up there. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So I did everything, all the techniques in my book, I did for comedy, just like I did when I started a hedge fund or when I started an agency. And, so I started having very good comedians on my podcast. So whatever happened to me the night before on the stage, I could ask them in the course of my interview on the podcast, hey, what would you do if this happened or this happened or this happened? And so usually these advanced comedians wouldn't be so gracious with a up-and-coming comedian. They might be, but they might not be. And having them on my podcast was a good way to skip the line. By the way, anybody could start a podcast and ask whoever they want on. Some people said no, some people said yes. And that was just like with me. And another thing I did was I very much watched every comedian. I took notes on their styles. I would imitate them so that I could get a really good sense of their style. And I just, this is a skip the line technique, but I don't recommend it to anyone. I bought a comedy club, so that guaranteed I was on stage, but I was already going on stage all over town by that time. And, I would always experiment with new ideas to learn things. And I would always take the hard path. So for instance, let's say I was at a club and Chris Rock just shows up, and somebody, the booker, the manager might ask me, do you want to go on before Chris Rock or after we surprise the audience with a Chris Rock appearance? And I would 100% of the time say after. And everybody else said before, because they didn't want to have to deal with an audience that had just seen one of the best comedians of all time. But I figured, what is the fastest way for me to make better? I'm not here to just go on stage. I'm here to, everything I do has to move me forward so I can keep skipping the line. And so I would always choose after. And so I would learn an enormous amount about how to get the audience back on my side and how to convince the bookers that I was willing to take those risks. And, I did so many different experiments, and that's the key, really. It's not the hours you put in, which is what everybody mistakenly thought. It's the experiments you do, the way you really challenge yourself, and the way you learn in situations that no one else is learning.
So how do you deal with the mental side of this? So I'll give you an example. So I tried to be a stand-up comedian as well. I did 100 mics. I was on Kill Tony out in LA. Like I was just, trying to do this. I started writing movies. I wrote 5 movie scripts. I even made like a little indie film. I spent $7,000 on it. The thing that got me back into doing business and got me out of retirement of business, because I'd basically outsourced the whole thing, was just like this existential dread that I was wasting my life with movies when I should have been like a business guy. Is this something that you've dealt with at all? Doing comedy and all this stuff?
Completely, because I wonder to myself, I look back, gosh, in these past 6 years, 7 years, whatever it was, I could have started a business, for instance. And I've been involved with startups and stuff, and I've been an investor in startups during this process. Again, I diversify the many things I do. So I was doing comedy, I was writing, I was podcasting, I was investing in startups, and every now and then I even did a startup during this time. But I really think, like, what if I hadn't been performing 5 nights a week, which each time you perform, it might even be only a 15-minute show, but it really takes about 4 or 5 hours of your time preparing, going there, waiting, coming back, unwinding. And so I spent an enormous number of hours doing comedy. What if I had started another business? Like, what if I tried to make $1 billion starting something? Maybe I could have made, that kind of money. I mean, some of my friends did during that time. But, I think like that, but it was so much pleasure for me. And I'm going to die in 30 years, say, anyway. So it's great that I got a chance to do something I love. I mean, I got to the point where I was touring all over the world, really, and definitely all over the country and sometimes outside the country. And nobody gets to do that after just 4 or 5 years of comedy. Now, even right before the pandemic started, I was in the Netherlands, came back the day before. I was all over the Netherlands and came back the day before the lockdowns. But I don't know, it was a very pleasurable thing. And how much does one need in life? Do you really need $500 million, or do you need to have success in all the various areas of your life to be happy?
Hey, by the way, as this interview is going, if you wanted to start a business, go over to email10k.com. That's our course on how to start a services business. It's one of the best courses on that. So go ahead, email10k.com, check that out.
And it comes from internally. I'm going to put some shit on you. Tell me if this is totally off base, because this is what happened with me with art. I had girlfriends and I had people just hate on me, tell me I wasn't an artist. And just like, I felt how some people, they hate when you become an entrepreneur, when you quit your job. Try going from entrepreneur to artist and see how much more hate you get. Was this something you had to deal with?
I mean, every single day for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
I left graduate school in computer science, one of the best schools in the country, because I wanted to be a writer. And like you, I wrote 4 novels. I wrote dozens of short stories. Nothing got published. And my parents were into computers and they were like, what are you doing? And to be honest, my writing sucked. This is 30 years ago. So, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is everybody thinks they're better than they are. There's a cognitive bias. Everyone thinks they're better than they are at what they are beginning to do. So I thought I was a great writer. And now looking back on it, I just found some of my old writing. I really sucked. But anything worth doing, you're going to suck at, no matter how talented you are, no matter how interested you are in it. Things worth doing are very, very hard. So, let's say you're a natural prodigy at tennis. You're going to play really good against your hometown and your parents and your friends. But then when you start getting into competition, you're going to very quickly hit resistance. You're going to meet the people who are as talented as you, and now you need skills. and you're going to be disappointed because you're going to start losing massively for the first time and you're not used to that. It's going to suck really bad. People think, oh, I just want to do the things that make me happy. No, you don't, because TV makes me happy. But if all you did was that, it's a waste of a life. I love TV, by the way. I watch TV probably every day. But if that's all you do all day long, then you waste your life. And that makes me happy, watching TV. But things that are worth getting good at are always difficult. It's not about happiness. It's about mastery. And mastery is a key component of ultimate happiness.
Okay, that's interesting. You talked about wasting your life, because that's a thought process I've gone down too. It's like, do you just follow, the hype? Like, do you just go with like whatever you're excited about in the moment? Like, how much of it is excitement now versus thinking about like a long-term life plan?
I don't really think of the long term. I think of excitement now. But sometimes being an entrepreneur excites me. Sometimes comedy excites me. Sometimes getting better at chess excites me. Sometimes podcasting. So, and it's good if a couple of things excite you. So then you could do comedy and you could do your work. Or I wrote for every day, 3,000 words a day from 1990 to 1995. And then I kind of stopped writing for a while because I got excited about my business, making websites. But then I didn't realize it, but I had by that point developed a skill at writing. So when I started writing again in 2002, I had the professional level skill. It had kind of germinated inside of me, and I had a lot more experiences now. And so I became very successful at writing. And by successful, I mean financially. And people read me. So it's not the most lucrative thing I've ever done, but if I had to, the worst case is I always knew I could make a living at writing because I had that skill now. And so it's always good long term to master any skill that you love. Why is it important that you love it? It's not because, so that, you're happy every day and you skip to work. It's because when you love doing something that's difficult, and again, I'll repeat it, everything worth doing is difficult. When you love something that's difficult, you don't need as much energy to do it. So if I love writing and you don't, and we're both trying to be successful writers, part of your energy in the morning is convincing yourself, okay, I got to write. It's good for me. I better do it. Whereas I don't have to use that energy because I love writing. So the less energy you use to get to your goal, the more important it is. And that's why loving what you're doing is a good way to conserve energy.
I felt like at some level I have to use that energy for literally everything. Like filming YouTube videos, I've been doing it for 6 years. Even if it's Monday, if it's filming day, I still have to convince myself to film it. Writing movies, I still have to convince myself to do it. Even like even getting hyped up for this interview. I watch all your shit. I read all your shit. I was super stoked. Even this, I had to convince myself to like want to do.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, because it's not like I'll tell you. First off, we were talking about comedy earlier. Yeah. Comedy is not pleasant. Like the minutes before you go on stage, you're scared to death. Let's say when you get good, you're 80 to 90% of the time, you'll do great. You'll kill it. 10% of the time, maybe a little more, you'll not do so good. And sometimes you'll bomb horribly, and that feels miserable. So it's hard to love any one thing, forever. So you have a relationship with it. It's just like going out with somebody. You're excited and you love them, but then you have to kind of temper the fact that you have a committed relationship. Sometimes it's not great. You can't just abandon it when it's not great, and you figure out your problems. But it's the same thing with everything. But you do need to have something that gets you up, so you do it again. And sometimes you have to use more of that energy. Sometimes you have to use less of that energy.
In business, how much of it is right time? Because it seems like you're working at a certain level, and it just really seems like it's like whatever you're working on, if you work on the right thing, you don't even have to put in that much work. It like just kind of happens, versus you could work super hard on something that has almost no demand and it just doesn't take off. So
yeah, it's always,
okay.
It's like, it's probably like, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but yeah. Maybe it's 80% being at the right time. Because imagine if you wanted to start a horse company in 1900. Oh, everybody's going to use horses to travel forever. Like, they're not going away, horses. This new kind of car thing, you can't go too fast in a car. And of course, that would have been wrong timing if you had started a horse business in 1900. And, for me, if I started a CD-ROM digital business in 1992, that would have been wrong timing or if I started a website business in 2002, that would have been wrong timing because WordPress was about to be invented. And then instead of charging $100,000, you could just do a website for free. So, everything's timing. I started a business during this lockdown, which I haven't launched the product yet, but I'll tell you what it is because we're about to launch it. You and I are using Zoom right now to record this podcast. Well, Zoom has some basic problems, and Zoom also has some more subtle problems. But Zoom doesn't care because during this pandemic, they got like 700 million customers, and they're not really focused on their problems because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But like, for instance, you and me we had an internet glitch. That means one side of this recording the audio will sound a little off for a few seconds. So I started making a Zoom for podcasters that really solves a lot of these sorts of basic problems for podcasters. Now, I have competition in that, and I mitigated the risk. I had to analyze why I was potentially better than the already existing competition. And so I had to go through a lot of risk management to start a business like this, but I think I have, and we'll see what happens. It helps that I'm an expert not only in the skills required to make a business like that, but I'm also an expert in the field. So there's the skills and there's the field, and you have to be expert at both to be an entrepreneur. So it didn't matter. It was important that I knew how to make a website when I started that business, but it was also important to know, okay, here's how, here are the companies that are making websites. Here's how I'm better. Here's where my niche is. So that tells me which companies to approach and sell and so on. Like knowing the field is a different skill. I might be a great writer, but if I don't know anything about the publishing business, I'll never publish. And so people always have to think, oh, I'm an artist. They just don't get me. Are you an artist? If you're an artist, yeah, you need the skills, but you also need to understand, well, I got to show my stuff to these people, or these influencers have to like what I'm doing. And this applies not just now, but the whole history of art.
When you're investing in a new software company like this, how do you deal with, how do you think about business? So for instance, like there's a lot of server problems you're gonna have to deal with. Like this is probably a $250,000 or more app you're trying to build, right? In terms of just like, try to make it scalable and doing all this stuff, like long-term, right? And you could even spend 60 million on this, you know what I'm saying? So how do you think about starting this business in a scalable way without doing that, or is that what you're doing?
So this is a very interesting question because people say ideas are a dime a dozen and execution is everything. Well, execution, first off, that statement is not true. If you don't have an idea, you don't have a business. And ideas are not that easy to come up with. Most people are not very creative, and most people don't exercise their creativity muscle. But that aside, execution's a spectrum. Some people don't execute very well. Some people execute very well. And I've now been fortunate enough to be involved in many businesses as an investor, as a board member, as an advisor, and as the CEO and founder. And I've done bad execution, medium execution, good execution. And, the key with good execution is to do everything. It's sort of like they call it the minimum viable product. You don't always want to make the minimum viable product. You want to use the minimum viable money and the minimum viable energy and time to create something. So I'm going to hire a programmer. I don't want to hire a company and spend $1 million to create this product. I found the best programmer I knew, and I know a lot of programmers. I found the best programmer I knew. I asked him to partner with me on it. He said no, but he recommended somebody. I called that guy. We got along. And he wanted equity, and I say, okay, 50-50. I pay, some things, I pay for any costs, but he's programming the whole project and his team. He's got other people. My son's a programmer, so I'm using my son as well. And so I'm spending you would be surprised how little I'm actually spending in cash. Now I'll need money later, but I'm not going to raise money until this is launched and has customers, because I don't want to raise money on a dream. I want people to feel like there's a lot of energy behind this and confidence, and I don't want to take anyone's money unless the product's done and the business has really started moving. So I'm using the minimum viable energy required to start this up, because I'm executing well and I'm not spending any money.
How confident are you in this based on what you've done? So because me and my co-founder has a software background and he's agency software. So it's like, if I ask him about a business idea, his first gut feeling will be like, yeah, man, we could do that for $120,000. And I'm like looking at his cost and I'm like, oh, he is actually spending enough hours to make it worth this, right? But he doesn't need to be spending all these hours. Like, what are you doing? So how do you get over that hurdle, right? How do you get the confidence to get to that point? What does this look like in your mind? Where was the business before you decided to even hire the programmer?
Right. So it was podcasting software. So that's a little easier for me. I've done 1,000 podcasts or so. And so I don't have to work as hard to validate the idea because I know what I need. And what I need is what every podcaster needs. And because we're all doing remote recording now. So it was a little easier to validate the idea. And then I knew the competition because I was using the competition. And so my challenge there is understanding, why isn't the competition doing some basic things that I seem to realize? And part of that was I looked at their resumes of who they were hiring and things like that, the LinkedIn pages of all their employees, just to see what's their skill set versus the skills I bring to the table and my technical founder brings to the table. And by the way, I'm technical as well. I went to computer science graduate school and I was a programmer in my first bunch of jobs, and I was a programmer at my first company. So, so that's some way I mitigate the risk. In terms of the odds it's going to work, though, I'm comfortable saying it's probably not going to work. It's probably maybe a 20 or 30% chance of success, but that's why I diversify the things that I do in life, the things that I do for money, the things that I do for enjoyment, the things that I try to get mastery at, because no real business has, very few businesses have greater than a 50% chance for success. You know what has a greater than 50% chance of success is if you buy a laundromat in a good location and it's already existed for 20 years and the founder died and their kids don't want to own a laundromat and you're willing to buy it for like 1/4 of what it's technically worth. They'll sell it to you because 70% of businesses in the country just shut down when their time span is done. So the kids are happy to get anything. And that's a no risk. That has a greater than 50% chance of success. But most other businesses do not. And extreme venture businesses have about a 10% chance of success. This is somewhere in the middle, so I figured it's got about a 20 or 30% chance of success. And I'm able to be really honest with myself because I'm diversifying all my things. So I don't get the cognitive, I call this the smoking crack bias, which is that people tend to think that the businesses they start are the greatest thing since crack and that it'll definitely work. But there's huge risk in any business,
especially when you're talking about right place, right time, right?
Yeah.
Now that you've got the speed of movement too, because there's a lot of competitors in the video space. It's not just Zoom. It's like, why did Zoom win? Actually, have you thought about this at all? Why did Zoom win over Google Hangouts or over any of these other ones? Is this something you thought about?
Yeah, I mean, Zoom's got a lot of good potential for meetings. Like we can have a big meeting and then breakout meetings. And Zoom just has the basic functionality. It's very easy to use. It's free. You could use it for free, but you're limited to 40 minutes, but it's very easy to use for free. There are some like corporate quality Zooms, but it's very expensive. And there are some competitors to Zoom, which right away you got to pay like $300 a month or whatever, and people don't want to do that. So, but Zoom's got a lot of good basic features. It was the right choice for good, basic, cheap use. But, wouldn't it be nice if there's a soundboard on it or audio editing in real time while you're doing the podcast or local recording of audio on both sides, so to have perfect audio quality. So, there's all sorts of, things that Zoom doesn't have.
Have you seen Zencastr?
Yeah, I use Zencastr. Zencastr is now the competition that I use. I was using Squadcast, but I've been having problems with it lately since they switched to now they didn't do video before, now they do video. Zencastr didn't do video, now they do video, and I think Zencastr did a better job than Squadcast at implementing it. Not a perfect job, by the way. There's audio drift on Zencastr, and there's some other issues.
There is, but it's also a marketing issue. Like if you come out and you hit this with even a Zencastr clone that's marketed a little harder, should be able to take them down.
Yeah, and also, I don't know, do you use Zencastr at all?
I used to use them so much. And then
Yeah,
I
but they
stopped podcasting as much. Now I use just Zoom.
Yeah, Zencaster just released a video version, but the problem is if you start a new recording, it logs. I don't know why they do that. They log everyone out automatically, and sometimes I'll start if I'm not looking at the video, which sometimes, let's say I'm looking at the screen for whatever reason, I'll start doing a podcast and everybody's logged out, and I didn't realize that. So there's problems.
Zencaster, I've had that happen too, even just on the audio version. I've had people get kicked
okay.
off, and these are people that would not call back in. You know, like they're high level people
like if you
who
mess
maybe their
up,
assistant had connected me in. Like they don't know how to use Zencaster.
Right, like if you and this is what I always tell the people I'm working with on this project. If you mess up on Richard Branson, that's it. That is the end of your only chance to do a podcast with him. It's over.
Yeah.
And you can't do it. The other thing is, here's the problem with Zoom. I can't ask Richard Branson, listen, you got to download an application called Zoom. And don't worry, there's no viruses. I know you're running 300 businesses and involved in 1,000 philanthropies and talk to every government in the world. We're not spying on you. Just please download this application called Zoom. He's not going to do it. You can't ask him to download something. You just have to give him a link and it's all good. But we all have, you and I both have Zoom downloaded on our computers.
That is so insane to think about too, because of who owns Zoom also. But yeah. This is just spyware.
A guy who was in the Chinese Communist Party started Zoom. And by the way, he's probably not a spy or a communist. I'm not accusing him of anything. He's a good guy. But you got to be careful these days. That we've seen this with everything. You have to be careful.
So interesting. Okay, so how do you think about, or what are some of the right place, right time things that, let's say a new entrepreneur wanted to start a business right now, where do you think they would go based on what you've been thinking about?
Well, a lot of it is hard to say because we don't really know. But here's a great example. Like if you wanted to make $10 million in the next 2 or 3 years, this is one way to do it. Start a coronavirus compliance business. So compliance is a huge issue for every, Fortune 5,000 company. Like the 5,000 biggest companies, they have a legal team, they have regulations to deal with, and it's hard for them. So, and they spend millions and millions of dollars on compliance issues. So what is coronavirus compliance is a new industry. Is your office space set up to protect people against coronavirus? Is everybody disinfecting? Is there social distancing in the architecture? What are the liability issues if an employee gets coronavirus while on the job for you? Are you responsible? So companies don't know the answer because there are no answers yet, and because it's state by state and country by country. These laws are going to be very complicated. Even with the vaccine, people are going to be getting coronavirus forever. So because the vaccines only work so much, and there's going to be new strains, it's going to mutate, it's going to be like the flu. And so it would be great if somebody developed a course and, hey, you call up GE, I'll go into all your offices and I'll give a free seminar on this is how your doors should be made. This is how your architecture should be done. These are the laws. This is the right products you should use for disinfectant. And then you could sell them those products, maybe, compliance in a box, like here's everything you need. And then you have a newsletter updating people on how the laws are changing and the liabilities and so on. And you could build a whole consulting business out of that. And, every month you come in and say, okay, this is good, this is not so good. You need to do this, this, and this. And, that's going to be a multi-$10 billion industry. And some people are going to benefit from that. Some big companies are already pivoting to that, but there's opportunity. So, that's a right place at the right time. Another right place at the right time is a lot of small businesses don't think about social media other than socially. Like if you're a lawyer, let's say you're a personal injury lawyer, you might think of social media as, okay, this is how I'm going to keep in touch with my friends. But I bet you, and I've seen this, you can basically go to a personal injury lawyer or a dentist or a plumber and say, listen, I could quadruple your revenues by taking over your social media, and I charge $100 a month or $200 a month, and I'm going to quadruple your revenues. If you don't like it, you can fire me in 4 months. Give me a chance for 4 months. And there's so many things you could do for people on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, where you're going to quadruple their revenues. That, I know somebody who started a year and a half ago, and I'm using personal injury as an example because they basically went to every personal injury lawyer, and now they have $1.5 million revenue business. it's a service business, which is not always the best. It's better to have a product business. But, that's the right place at the right time because social media is big, but small businesses using social media hasn't really taken off.
It's interesting you went with product and courses specifically, because one thing that you did that a lot of people are scared to do is you went balls to the wall, like, Bitcoin millionaire predicts the future. Like, you went fucking crazy with the internet marketing course stuff, which I think a lot of people are terrified to do. They think it's going to burn down their audiences or like whatever. Like, what were you thinking about there?
First off, I was terrified also because I was afraid it was going to burn down my audience.
Yeah.
But two things. One is I partnered with another company to do my marketing, and I had a good deal with them that I liked. I basically, made sure the deal was good and would be worth it. The second thing is I only create courses or newsletters around things I really believe in. So, I mean, I was even on CNBC recommending Bitcoin in 2013, but this course started in September 2017 when Bitcoin was around 3,000. Now, I don't know, it's near 50,000 or something. And, but here's the thing. And I was very nervous about the marketing, but here is the thing. I forgot exactly which philosopher said this, but essentially the idea is in order to get attention, you have to use the techniques, even if you're a good guy, you have to use the techniques of the bad guys to get attention because they are going, like you said, they're going balls to the wall. So you need to market as well as them because we're in an attention glutted economy. If you just say, hey, I'm a nice guy, I have something to tell you about Bitcoin, nobody's going to buy your product. They're going to buy the product of the guy, I'll make you a Bitcoin gazillionaire in 10 days. And the reality is I knew that there was nobody good in the space. Like they didn't really care about Bitcoin. I legitimately cared about Bitcoin. So my goal was, I had a vision for this, which was the average person at that time didn't even know what Bitcoin was. This would be the only way to get their attention. Else they're going to end up buying some of these really crappy products that are just going to scam you. I actually explained what Bitcoin was and educated people on it. So even though I got a huge amount of heat and hate, now on Twitter every single day, someone says, I'm so glad I learned about Bitcoin from this newsletter that James Altucher did. I got a lot of people into it. The reality is, though, it was so unpleasant. I really just hated my life when everybody was hating me all day long. I shouldn't have spent so much time looking at it on social media. So,
and I think
there's a give and take there.
Mid or even short term, like everyone's kind of forgotten about it. I only bring it up because this is something that I think everybody in the entrepreneurship how-to space has thought about doing what you did for a while. And a lot of us bitch out. Like, we're like, no, we can't do this. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's insane because you have to go all out. I mean, I basically bought the internet during that period, and because my ads were doing so well that we kept doubling down on it. And look, ultimately, I did help a lot of people. A lot of people hated me and still do, and I felt really bad about that. But if they were going to hate me for that after seeing everything I had done for free for years, I mean, I'd been working for free on helping people for years and years and years, like over a decade at that point. And I probably don't really want them in my life anyway, if they're going to be like that.
I thought there was a lot of art to it too. I still remember one video you did, what was it? Stock market magic, where you were just having people put in money and then like money flew out of the computer. I thought that video was awesome.
that is a great product because that's a strategy. Every strategy I pick, I've played professionally. So I ran a hedge fund. I've managed money professionally. Every strategy that I talk about, I know is a good strategy because I've done it professionally and I've done work that the average newsletter writer doesn't work. So I know what my special advantage is. And, that's part of my marketing, I guess, is that no one else can really say they've done these strategies professionally. I'm not just making it up.
Awesome. Okay. So everyone, if you're watching this, go check out James's new book. Where do you want to send people? Actually, where are we going after this?
Well, I have a brand new book called Skip the Line about how to basically skip the line in anything you want to do and monetize it as quickly as possible. I guess that's the easy. I don't even know what the easiest way to describe something is. I'm not very good at like describing things.
It's about finding like what are the few things that you can do to actually jump everybody else that's working super hard.
Yeah, like in both skills and business, meaning let's say you're interested in sports, but you're 45 years old, you're not going to be an athlete. or even if you're 23 years old and not going to be an athlete, you want to get this, you want to be in the top 1% of skills in whatever it is you want to do, and you want to be in the top 1% of the field, the business of sports, however that is. So my book gives ideas and methods and techniques that I've personally used. Again, I hate all these how-to books or self-help books where it's just like based on academic research and nobody actually did anything. I've used these techniques. So one thing I've done recently is, after that TV show, The Queen's Gambit, came out, I figured, you know what? I used to study chess. When I was a kid, I was a chess master, and but I hadn't studied chess in 23 years, so I've gotten a lot worse than I was at my peak. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to just use the techniques in my book, in Skip the Line, to get better than I ever was at chess. And so I did. I very specifically use every chapter. And right now, I'm probably, I definitely am better than I ever was at chess. Like maybe it's like 4 months later. And normally it would take years. The other thing is, well, how do you make money in chess? Well, if I wanted to, I can start pursuing that too. There are now ways in which any chess player can make money, like streaming on Twitch, and if you have the right personality for that. So there's ways to learn that skill as well.
Awesome. All right, James, thanks for being here. Really
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.
This video is brought to you by Email 10K. So you don't have a business idea, huh? Do you want to know what the best business to start is, regardless of market conditions? Check out the free presentation at email10k.com. We have over 200 students that are crushing it using this business strategy, even during this time. So check that out, email10k.com. Thanks for watching the video. If you want more interviews like this, go ahead and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments, is there anyone you'd love to see me talk to? Would love to get a conversation going. Who are the big people in the space? Who do you want to see a collab with? Let me know down below. And subscribe to this. We've done 400 videos, 500 videos, maybe even close to 1,000 videos. I actually have no idea. All about entrepreneurship and sales. So if you want more content like this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm Alex Berman.